late summer is all about our vegetable harvest. I'm with Justin at Blooming Junction, and he has 4 tips for us on how to harvest or when to know how to harvest.
That's right. Tip number 1 is keeping track. A lot of us get so busy, we're out in our garden, we just put things in, we don't label, we don't keep track, and then you don't know exactly what you've planted and you don't know how long it will take to be ready. So knowing what variety you've planted and knowing its days to harvest will help you to know when to be looking for ripeness or for the peak maturity in that plant. And, you know, as for instance, if you're growing a green zebra tomato and you don't label it, you may be just looking from afar and thinking, oh, it's still a green unripe tomato, you know. So label and know what you're growing and know how many days to harvest. Tip number 2 is checking daily. A lot of things, you know, such as our zucchini, cucumbers, and beans can grow so fast that, you know, if you miss one day, they can already start to get tough. So having a connection with your garden and being out on a daily basis will help to make sure that you're keeping an eye on everything and know when it's going to be at its peak. Third tip, I always encourage people to pick small, you know, to pick early and pick often. And a lot of that is because there's going to be better flavor, and sometimes as produce gets larger, it can be more fibrous or more seedy. So that's especially true with things like zucchini, eggplant. I like to pick more in sort of the 6-inch range. I think eggplant has gotten a really bad rap because people sometimes pick it huge, you know, and it just gets a little more fibrous. It can be a little more bitter. So picking at a smaller size, I encourage people to. And also, the picking often will encourage your plant to produce more fruit. It puts more energy back into the plant, and you'll end up with a more abundant harvest over time. And my 4th tip is to have realistic expectations. You know, the produce that we grow in our gardens is not going to look like the produce that grows in California. We aren't going to get huge, tightly packed broccoli heads and cauliflower heads. And so, you know, check for ripeness, and it may not look perfect, but don't let it pass waiting for it to look have that perfect California look. So let's go over some of these vegetables that I have and how to check them for ripeness. So on that broccoli, you know, your broccoli may only get so big, you know, like yay big, but when it's tight and formed, you may just get a small head. I think a lot of us wait too long, the flowers open up, and it passes. So pick broccoli as soon as it's got a nice tight head. Beans, we mentioned, they grow so fast. They should be filled out and snap easily, but you don't want them to be bulging. As soon as that happens, it's going to be tough and fibrous. You know, our onions and garlic, I wait until the tops have at least halfway died down to 2/3 died down. Then we know they're ready to pick and cure. And a lot of things, you know, radishes, beets, these root crops, radishes grow so fast, and they also get a little tough and fibrous when you let them get too big. So picking, you know, smaller than a golf ball for radishes, slightly between a golf ball and a baseball for beets, has some great flavor.
And what about corn and melons? Because those are really coming on.
That's right. Sweet corn is really coming on. So what you want to look for is this sort of dried silk. You want it brown, but not super dry. You know, if it just flakes off, it means that it may have passed a little bit. And you'll want to feel all the way to the end to know that it is filled out with kernels. And the other thing you can do here, you don't want to do this to all of them, obviously, but you can open it up and do the fingernail test. And if you see a little bit of milky fluid come out, you know that it's right at its peak and ready to be harvested. The other thing that is probably the most tricky to figure out is melons. And so varieties of musk melons will always slip right off the vine. You should never have to tug really hard. Those will always come off really easily. True cantaloupes, on the other hand, will not slip. And what you'll look for is where the stem attaches, there will be little tendrils. And you want that first tendril to be really brown and crisp. And I usually wait for that to turn brown. And about 4 or 5 days after I see that it's brown, I would go ahead and harvest true cantaloupes.
So that's all about melons, but people are interested in watermelons these days.
That's right. Yeah, watermelon can be a really tricky one to know when it's ripe because you can't tell by smell or by feel like you can with some of our other fruits and vegetables. My tip for watermelons is, you know, all watermelons will have a spot on the bottom, the ground spot, where it's sitting as it ripens. And what you look for is, if you see this spot is very white, it means that it's not quite ripe yet. You want to see that start to turn yellow. And if you notice that it's striping all the way across the bottom of the watermelon, it's definitely not ready yet. The other thing you want to look for is it will lose its sort of brilliant sheen and turns to a much more dull color in the skin as soon as it's ready. So those two signs, plus how I mentioned with true cantaloupe, how out of the stem side, that first tendril will turn brown, and I wait until about 4 or 5 days after I see that first tendril turn brown and crisp. And so that's the sign. There's always the thumping, but I really think that the yellow belly and the tendril is the best way to know when your watermelon is ready to be picked.
These are all great tips for us as gardeners, but also if we're shopping. So you really have something for us too.
We do, that's right. I mean, if you don't have a big garden, we always have a full bounty here in our store at Blooming Junction. But we're also offering a late season extension to our CSA. It stands for Community Supported Agriculture, and it's a weekly program that we have where folks can come out and pick up a box of vegetables of whatever we're harvesting that week. And it runs through from October to late December, and people can find more information on our website.
So please click over to that website or just come on out here and get all that information. Justin, thanks so much.
Thank you.